I mean, the Israelis are doing a lot of posturing right now, and much of that is for political purposes. The United States, Israel has to be careful because if, for instance, it strikes Iranian oil targets, the Iranian response will be to shut down Middle East oil production, shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and throw the global economy into absolute paralysis. The American economy on the eve of an election will be spinning out of control, will be devastating for the Biden administration and the Harris candidacy. And if Israel thinks that it can do this and not pay a price, I think they're wrong. And I think the Biden administration is trying to impart that on. So you've heard from the Israelis, okay, we won't hit oil targets. Then you've seen them say, well, we're going to hit nuclear targets. That's been their fantasy. Well, they can't hit nuclear targets. We'll just start off with the reality that the most important nuclear targets, Natanz and Firdos, are underground. And so especially Firdos would require the use of nuclear weapons to destroy it. And that would require Israel to, basically end its policy of deliberate ambiguity and acknowledge we are a nuclear power and that we have used nuclear weapons preemptively. This would trigger Iran's withdrawal from the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty and the rapid development of a nuclear weapons capability that would be used in retaliation against Israel and destroy Israel. It has the potential of bringing in Russia and the United States as well. So the United States has said, we don't want you to go down this path as well. So this leaves Israel with doing a retaliation that will strike military targets, leadership targets, maybe some non-oil and gas producing infrastructure targets. But Iran has said, if you do this, we will hit you with a saturation attack, 1,000 missiles, maybe 2,000 missiles coming in and taking out Israel's infrastructure itself. And maybe Israel's willing to risk all this in the hopes of dragging the United States into a larger conflict. But to sit there and talk about the region as well. Look, Saudi Arabia, made peace with Iran, the rapprochement. And many other nations are willing to live with Iran because they believe, that Iran is a regional power with, significant military capabilities that can no longer be intimidated, and that rather than continuing to go down the path of, forceful containment, that maybe the best path is to learn how to peacefully coexist. And I think the Israeli attack is designed to demonstrate to the nations of the region that Iran is not a power, a superpower, that it is very vulnerable to attack, and that the nation should reevaluate their stance vis-a-vis Iran. I think the Israelis would also seek to simultaneously engender some sort of domestic unrest similar to what happened in 2023 and the aftermath of the death of that Iranian girl that died in police custody because of the hijab violation. But this is all rhetoric. I mean, we have to see what Israel can do. Hitting Iran is a very difficult proposition. Iran is a long way away. There will be the need for refueling. There will be the need to be able to overcome Iran's air defense system. Israel's never attempted something like this before. Russia may be involved both in terms of manning and directing S-400 missile batteries, but also maybe piloting Su-35 interceptor aircraft, maybe integrating their own AWACS aircraft, which can take off and fly a profile over the Caspian Sea to detect any incoming F-35s, F-22s, F-15Is, and vector Iranian air defense to them. There's no guarantee that Israel is going to be able to pull this off. It's a very, very difficult proposition. So I hear a lot of rhetoric coming out of Israel, but trying to transform that rhetoric into reality is it's a tall order.
Don't you think that putting 100 American soldiers in Israel with this new air defense system would complicate the situation between Iran and Israel, even the United States?
No. First of all, Iran doesn't need to target it. Iran will be able to hit all the sites it wants to hit. There's only 48 interceptors in the THAAD system. if Iran fires 1,000 missiles and all 48 hit, and I'm not much of a mathematician, but that leads me to believe there'd be 952 missiles that are still inbound. And if Iran follows up with another salvo of 1,000 missiles, the THAAD becomes a totally irrelevant system, easily saturated, easily defeated. And again, it's not, new. This is older technology. It's technology that has its roots in the technology of the 70s and the methodologies of the 70s, as opposed to something new that just came out of the American defense industry brain trust. So the THAAD's not going to be a game changer. It's not going to do anything. It's more of a political statement saying we are here. It's also, to be frank, it's part of the standard force protection package. If we're going to be, because we have Americans, everybody's like 100 Americans would be deployed to Israel full time. We already have Americans deployed to Israel full time. We have a large number of logisticians, cargo handlers that are, living and operating in Nevatim and other airfields to receive incoming American aircraft and offload them. We already have Americans in harm's way. This is just a standard force protection package that's put in when Americans could find themselves potentially in the middle of a conflict. The threat is identified as missiles. Therefore, the counter to the threat will be an anti-missile capability. THAAD is one of the most advanced anti-missile capabilities the United States possesses, so we're deploying it. But it's not going to change anything.
Do you think that what was the question is, many people are asking, what was the necessity of Israel receiving this new air defense system, this THAAD, the air defense system from the United States? Is that related to what has happened to Nevatim Air Base during that attack, that Iranian attack? Did they destroy any air defense system that Israelis wanted to replace it, or it's an additional aid to Israel?
Well, again, we don't know the full extent of the damage done by the Iranian missiles. We do know that there were 32 separate impact points on Nevatim. We also know that some missiles came in and hit targets that the Iranians say are related to Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems, that these impacts took place before the air raid sirens came off, indicating perhaps hypersonic capabilities. So the fact of the matter is the Israelis don't have an air defense system that works. To integrate THAAD it's been tested. As I said, in I think 2019, THAAD was brought in, and they did the integration test that, you have a different kind of radar that's collecting data. How do you integrate that data into the overall data collection that's taking place, inclusive of American overhead satellites, the Aegis ships that are parked off the coast of the Mediterranean and down the Red Sea, their radars. So you have to find a way to plug in this radar data to integrate it in. So they've already tested it. So the THAAD is literally at this point in time a plug-in, plug-out system. It was deployed in October, integrated. So it's not as though the THAAD is going to radically change anything. It's going to plug in and add its capabilities. That now, the 48 interceptors have different intercept parameters, profiles that'll be factored in. So as a threat comes in, your battle management is going to detect and direct intercepts to take place. I think it's an S-band radar, but I could be wrong. Maybe an X-band radar on the THAAD. It's going to intercept at a further rate. It's going to be able to direct. So the THAAD is going to add a certain element of intercept capability to the system. And then you have to deconflict. I mean, what's David Sling doing? If THAAD's going to take over this sector, where's David Sling? You don't want them being overlapping sectors, because that's a waste of resources. You don't want to be firing THAAD and David Sling at the same target. So there's deconfliction that has to take place. This has all been factored in. And again, the Iranians aren't worried about this. I really don't think. First of all, the Iranians are smart. I don't know the Iranian battle plan. I don't know, what their thinking is, but I do know this: these are very smart people who are smarter than I am on these issues, and I know how I would plan an attack and the factors that I would put into it. And I'm confident that based upon the plan I could come up with, that I can easily overwhelm every aspect of the Israeli-American air defense umbrella that's been put up there, that it will not stop a concerted attack. And if Scott Ritter can do that thousands of miles removed, sitting in his office at home, I think Iranians who possess far better intelligence, who know the full capabilities of their systems, and have designed their systems. Remember, some of these are newer weapons that have been designed specifically for this purpose. For instance, the Fatah 2 is a solid rocket missile specifically designed to strike Israel. I think the Iranians have this problem set covered, and they will, they made their point twice. In Operation True Promise 1, they saturated the air defense. They collected so much intelligence, it's beyond belief. The how the aircraft operated, how the aircraft communicated, how the air defense responded as different levels of threat penetrated deeper and deeper inside Israel. They were able to look at how the battle space was handed off from from the aircraft firing forward to forward air defense to intermediate air defense to final air defense. The Iranians collected everything, and they're very good at this collection. And remember, Hezbollah is collecting intelligence, and Iran is collecting that intelligence on behalf. Hezbollah is collecting on behalf of Iran, and I think Iranian collectors are right there. Syria is collecting intelligence. The Russians are collecting intelligence. This is all being fed back to the Iranians. They had a full intelligence picture of what was going on, how the allies, Israel and their allied nations responded, and they've adapted to it. Operation True Promise 2 was a purely ballistic missile attack that you saw just saturated, boom, and it wasn't even the best missiles Iran has. This time around, Iran is going to be able to, it'll be devastating for the Israelis what will happen if Iran does attack. And that or Israeli air defense Arrow 2, 3, David Slings, Patriots, Aegis, SM-3s, they'll be able to intercept a handful of missiles. They're not going to intercept any of the hypersonics. And once the system gets saturated, it's ineffective, and the Iranian missiles are going to be able to hit whatever targets they want to.
In your opinion, if Israel decides to attack Iran, they're going to attack Iran by missiles together with fighter jets? And do we know what type of missiles do they have to attack Iran in terms of ballistic missiles, hypersonic, supersonic?
The Israelis have the Jericho class missile that they use. That's their primary nuclear delivery vehicle. I believe that it probably has been configured with conventional kinetic penetration warheads to hit hard targets, but probably also maybe some conventional explosives to take out leadership targets. But there's only so many that they have. They don't have thousands of them. They have scores of them. Maybe when they bring out in reserves, they might have a couple hundred of them. That's it. They also have cruise missiles that can be fired from submarines. So they have this German electric submarine is very quiet. Oftentimes is operating in the Red Sea. Believe it can project itself into the Arabian Sea, hover off the coast of Iran undetected, and fire missiles in that way. But then the primary strike vehicle for the Israelis will be aircraft, will be the F-35 or the F-15I strike aircraft. Your fighter protection will be with F-22s and probably F-16s. Maybe some of the F-16s will also be involved in attacking. I don't know. But that's their primary. But putting together a package like this, there's two scenarios that can be done. One is the stealth scenario. That is that you come in with a small number of aircraft that seek to use surprise and their stealth approach to penetrate rapidly, drop bombs, and get the heck out. You get to do that one time. And then you've got to go to the sustained strike package. And this means you're coming in with what we call during the Gulf War the guerrilla package. I mean, it's a big whole bunch of aircraft coming in. You have to put tankers in the air. You have to provide combat air protection for those tankers. Those tankers have to be rotated out because they themselves are operating away from their bases of operations. So basically, you got to put full-time gas station in the air. And then you've got to cycle airplanes in, get fueled up, and then go in and strike. And as they strike, you need, it's not just the strike aircraft. You need electronic warfare aircraft. You need combat air patrol aircraft to protect against air. You need suppression of enemy air defense aircraft. And so, you've got, there's an air campaign being run that is just that, a campaign. The initial strikes might be to suppress air defense. Then you have to come in and sweep the skies, and then you have to come in and you try to strike. This requires a lot of airplanes flying deep into Iran in a very exposed position. And eventually Iran will adapt to this. And then now we have a strategic air war being fought between Israel and Iran. And Israel, frankly speaking, can't sustain that because the casualties that will be accrued, both in terms of actual combat casualties, but remember, we're talking about aircraft like the F-35, which is notorious in terms of the amount of hours needed to keep it flying. And if you start using the F-35 on, in combat related, the kind of tempo related to combat, pretty soon your entire fleet's going to be down on the ground getting maintained. And now you're limited to what you can go. Everybody who's saying that Israel can do X, Y, and Z on the air, there's a reason why Israel has come to the conclusion that it must have the United States. First of all, to protect the tankers. You're not going to be able to run those gas stations over Iraqi airspace without American protection. The Iranians will get them. They will shoot them down. So now, how do you even begin talking about a sustained air campaign against Iran without American involvement? So if America is not going to be involved, you're basically talking about that one-time stealth attack, pop a couple targets and come out. But that's a one-time trick. And here's the problem. If Iran lives up to its promise, you come in and you bomb. By the time your planes try to land at the airfield that they took off from, that airfield may no longer exist because Iran's not coming in with 200 missiles. Next time they're coming in with 1,000 to 2,000 missiles. And that's a completely different ballgame. So it's just not as easy as everybody thinks it's made out to be.
And last time I talked with Ted Postal, he mentioned how Patriot system is successful against fighter jets. And what do we know about, because he said that against missiles, they're not that much successful as much as they are against fighter jets, and because it's so easy for them to hit the target. And when it comes to the Russian system, S-300, 400, how do you evaluate these air defense systems, and how successful would they be in attacking Israeli fighter jets?
Well, there's two things. One, Israel's plans have been predicated on S-300 type air defense capabilities backed by indigenous Iranian capabilities, with Iranian aircraft vectored in using Iranian command and control capabilities. But if Russia, folds in its AWACS capabilities, the advanced radar capabilities, the S-400, well, I'm not saying that Israel can't come up with a solution to that. Look, the S-400 is not perfect. The Ukrainians have, flown, the Scalp missile and the Storm Shadow, over S-400 sites and struck S-400 sites. So it's not the perfect weapon system. But none of those attacks took place without extensive NATO intelligence involvement, meaning the Ukrainians didn't wake up in the morning and go, let's go bomb an S-400 site. To take out the S-400, there were significant inputs made by NATO and the United States on facilitating that attack. Israel could receive those same inputs, but it's going to require them to redo their plan. One of the reasons why Israel may be waiting so long right now is that they have to redo their plans. And it's not just redoing the plans on paper. Their aircraft have to fly the profiles to make sure that the pilots are ready for what's going on. They have to rehearse this. And some of their rehearsals may include actual combat operations. For instance, some of the profiles that Iran is flying into Lebanon, into Syria, may incorporate some of the new tactics that Israel may use against Iran without saying so. But again, the Iranians and the Russians are on the alert for that. They're collecting the intelligence, they're factoring it in. So, you know, this just complicates things. I'm not saying that the S-400 can't shoot down Iranian Israeli aircraft. Maybe they can. Um, probably they can. But if Israel doesn't change its attack parameters to incorporate this new capability, then that's definitely they will shoot down Israeli aircraft, including the F-35. So Israel has to reevaluate the total strike package, and now it complicates things because these tactics may require aircraft to fly, terrain masking profiles for a longer distance. That burns up fuel, which means now you either have to push tankers forward, to fuel off, or you have to change aircraft. So you can't use planes that burn fuel. You have to swap them out for planes that can conserve fuel, and you may lose some capacity there. Planning an airstrike package like this is a very complicated thing. And the Russians providing the Iranians with S-400 electronic warfare and S-35 aircraft with the potential of being backed up by, the Russian AWACS aircraft. These are game changers. It doesn't mean game winners. It means game changers, that Israel will have to change the way it's playing the game if it wants to succeed.
And if you remember, before the conflict in Ukraine started, we had the communication between Russia and the United States just stopped, and nobody was talking with the United States in those days after failing to talk with Zelensky. And right now in the Middle East, yesterday the foreign minister of Iran was talking about that they're not having any sort of communication with the United States because they don't see any sort of benefit coming out of these talks. And do you think that, how do you find the situation right now? Do you think it's still under the control? They can control it, or it's getting out of the hand?
It's totally out of control. There's no diplomatic engagement. The United States, look, Biden just recently announced that he wanted to, resume, negotiations over arms control, the Strategic Nuclear Forces arms control. Nobody's going to talk to him. He can't be trusted, first of all. The United States can't be trusted. We've lied from day one. We lie about everything. And we still have a policy that says we want to strategically defeat Russia. Why would Russia agree to negotiate away the one thing that guarantees it will never be strategically defeated, which is the strategic nuclear forces, at a time when the United States still, actively embraces this policy? And even if the United States said, well, we changed the policy, we can't be trusted, we lie. I just want to tell your audience, in 2009, 2010, when the New START treaty was being negotiated between the Obama administration and the the Russian government, the Russians said that, look, we don't want to negotiate this treaty, reduction in nuclear forces without, we have to factor in ballistic missile defense. We're very concerned that if we start lowering the numbers of strategic nuclear forces we have, if you have missile defense, we're going to run into a situation where you have the potential of shooting down more missiles than we have, and that's the end of our nuclear deterrence. And the Obama administration at the time promised, it was then President Medvedev, look, we might be able to get this strategic arms reduction treaty through Congress to get it ratified by the Senate. But if we roll in air defense, missile defense, we can't get both of those passed. What we will do is, if you do this, trust us, the biggest words, and never trust Americans when their lips are moving because they're lying. Trust us. We'll get this treaty done, and then we promise we'll turn to the issue of ballistic missile defense. Anatoly Antonov, who was former Russian ambassador to the United States, just left, was the lead negotiator at that time, and he prevailed upon Medvedev to agree to this. And so they got the new treaty. The United States lied about that too. I mean, we lied about everything. We negotiated in bad faith about, how we do counting, how you pull launch capability out of a submarine or a B-52 bomber What we did is easily reversible, and we bragged about it. We had generals before Congress saying, don't worry about those numbers, because in a crisis, we can reverse them overnight and get our numbers up really quick. We built this treaty to achieve that. Do you see what I say? We built a treaty designed to reduce nuclear weapons so that we could trick the Russians in rapidly increasing the number of deployed nuclear forces at any time. That's called negotiation in bad faith. But the worst part came after the treaty was ratified, passed through, et cetera, when Anatoly Antonov picked up the phone and called Rose Goldmuller and said, okay, we're ready to move on anti-ballistic missiles. The United States said, nah, we're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. This isn't ancient history, ladies and gentlemen. This just happened. The Russians don't trust the United States. They don't trust anything the United States says. So they'll never, at this point in time, they're just not interested in entering into any of these negotiations. So there's no diplomacy there. With Iran, there was a back channel taking place. Apparently, the Iranians recently came out and made a statement that there was a back channel taking place through an intermediary, probably Qatar, which historically has done this role. They didn't get into what it was, but they said, we're done. There will be no more back channel, no more talk. Why? Well, because the United States, in carrying out this back channel, revealed that the Iranians had put on the table the possibility that they could absorb a limited Israeli strike and not retaliate. That's what the United States wanted. They wanted to bring this thing to an end. Now, the Iranians can't admit this in public because the whole idea of deterrence and everything is it's got to be believable. And so the Iranians are negotiating in secret with the United States to do something that is, it's difficult for any nation to do, to say we'll absorb a limited attack and we won't retaliate in order to bring this thing to an end. Then the United States leaks this. The Iranians, it's humiliating for them. They've been, they now have to explain to their people why this was. So they said, no more. We're done with the Americans. We can't trust you. You're liars. You can't be trusted. There's no diplomacy. So whatever hope we had with working back channels with the Iranians to, mitigate potential wider war is done because America, once again, can't be trusted.
Right now, Russian fighters are attacking some targets in Idlib and Aleppo and in those regions, which recently we've learned that the United States is providing them with weapons. And they're talking about that Turkey is behind these people as well. But right now that Russia is attacking them it's a preemptive attack, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the case, Scott?
Russia's been attacking them for some time now. You're talking about in Idlib. You're talking about the Islamists. Russia's been attacking them for some time now. The intensity of the attacks is increasing. And this may be in preparation for maybe a joint offensive operation between Russia, Syria, and Turkey to eliminate this problem, because this is, it's a huge problem for for regional security. This Wahhabist Al-Qaeda literal enclave that Turkey built, but Turkey can't control right now. It's and as long as it's there, it'll be impossible for the millions of refugees from Syria who are in Turkey to come home. Erdogan has a huge political problem. He needs to get these refugees out of Turkey, and he can't do that until Syria is stabilized, politically stabilized, and that can't happen until Idlib is cleansed. So I think you're starting to see the end game for these Islamists.
And Turkish government is attacking the Kurdish community, and which we know that the United States is providing them with weapons. What a complex situation, Scott, we're witnessing right now in the Middle East. It's in the United States, in Syria, with these Kurdish people against Turkey. And can we understand what would be the end game of the United States in the Middle East, considering all these activities?
Well, the end game of the United States is clear. Instability, chaos, friction, violence. The perpetual war that exists in the Middle East is good for American business. We're able to sell weapons. We're able to prevent our opponents from consolidating power and influence. This is what we do best. The last thing we want is peace and stability to break out, because the reality is, if peace and stability breaks out, Mother Nature dictates that you're going to have a better relations with people closer to you than you are to people far away from you, because the day-to-day interface is consistent. America will be at a strategic disadvantage. The only way that we can insert ourselves into this region is to make ourselves relevant. And we have opted to make ourselves relevant through military force. That is the go-to agency for the United States on how we deal with the world, the use of military force. I've likened what America is doing to the sort of, I call it the American Midas touch. Because America believes, because we are the exceptional nation, we are the indispensable nation, that everything we touch is gold, and that it somehow benefits us. So we touch a reason, we get a war, we sell weapons, that's gold. We touch another region, drive threats out, take over, have neo-colonial economic exploitation. Just think cobalt in Congo. People Google it, you'll know what I'm talking about. We need the cobalt. We need it for our cell phones and all our little electronics in the Congo. In order to get the cobalt out of the Congo, we need a civil war that's been going on now for decades, that's killed millions of people that nobody talks about, and it causes millions of small children to work in these mines under horrific conditions, poisoning their bodies, limiting their lifespan, just so that we all can have the convenience of having a cell phone. This is what America does. Touch it, gold for us. But the problem is, if you look at the Midas story, King Midas, this was a curse, because yes, everything he touched was the gold, but then he got hungry and they handed him an apple, and he touched the apple and he couldn't eat it because it's gold. He tried to drink water, couldn't, turned to gold. His daughter came to him and asked why he's so unhappy, and he touched her. She died. She turned to gold. And that's how King Midas ended up dying, starved, alone, because the Midas touch was a curse. And the American Midas touch is a curse. Everything we touch dies. I'll challenge anybody to come up with, show me where this isn't the case. We touched Iraq, millions of dead. We've touched Ukraine, hundreds of thousands of dead. Syria, hundreds of thousands of dead, if not more. Somalia, whatever we touch dies. We've done nothing good, especially since the end of the Cold War.
Erdogan just today said that the way that the United States, the Israelis are behaving in the Middle East right now, we cannot call them a state, because there is no country in the UN that cannot define its borders. It's the only country on this planet without defining its borders. How in 1948, when they have decided to put out a state of Israel, just recognizing this country, one of the conditions was to accept a Palestinian state, Scott. And what is and on the other hand, Erdogan is asking to boycott Israel, to put tremendous sanctions and so forth and so on. How do you find it right now, the situation? And do you think with these new talks on the part of Erdogan, maybe Arab states together with Iran, all together, Europeans are talking about this right now, and they're getting more serious about the conditions. As we talk at the beginning of this talk, the Biden administration finally is talking about it at least. And how do you see the situation with Israelis, and why we cannot pressure them to at least define their borders?
Because to get Israel to define their borders honestly would require Israel to admit that it has no desire to abide by international law, because the borders as defined by Israel isn't just about eliminating the Palestinian state. Once you allow that to happen, once you buy into the notion that Israel has a historical right to greater Israel, understand that the Israelis don't self-limit to the Palestinian territory. They're talking about expanding up to the Euphrates, to the Nile, and they view Greater Israel in biblical terms. And this is why Israel won't commit openly to these borders, because Israel has become a nation that is not governed by the laws of man, but rather governed by what the Israelis claim to be the law of God. And remember, the Israelis, the Jews view themselves as the chosen people, that they are God's chosen. And when you get into, the Talmud, which is basically the interpretation of the Torah by, ancient Hebrew scholars that have become basically the go-to text for rabbis to talk about, how to translate what took place in the Torah and the Bible to life. There are some very extreme Talmudic texts that speak of goyim. People like me, I don't know your religious background. I don't care. It's your business. But if you're not Jewish, you're goy, and you're an animal. And then we can go on there. It just devolves into murder, rape, all the things that they're allowed to do, the goy, because the goy aren't human. We don't count. And when under normal circumstances, this kind of extreme interpretation of religious text would be, left to a minority of people who, because of civil society, wouldn't be able to give voice to this. Look, I can go into the Christian Bible and pull out things that have been used to justify mass murder over the years. People can go to the Islamic text of the Quran and do the same thing. There's no religion that's immune to this. But what happened when, for instance, ISIS created the caliphate in Syria and Iraq, and chose to define Islam in the most extreme manner? The Islamic world turned against it and said, no, that's not what Islam is. That's what you say Islam is, but Islam isn't that. Islam is a religion that promotes peace, as opposed to the terror that you talk about. We don't promote murder. We do this. The same thing with Christians. By and large, the Christian faith is saying we believe in nonviolence, even though historically we know that hasn't always been the case. But and Jews, in the United States, there was a time you could go to a synagogue and you were dealing with people of peace. They peaceful coexistence, getting along. There was a time when you could have intercongregational meetings with Jews and Christians, not so much Muslims, because we've always been prejudiced against Muslims, but you should be able to come together and talk about these things. But now the synagogues have become, because of this conflict, have become festering cesspools of Jewish-centric fanaticism that speaks about defending Israel at all costs, that puts Israel ahead of the United States. It speaks about a greater Israel and the need to pursue a greater Israel, which condemns the Palestinians. It doesn't promote peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians. This is what the Jewish faith has become at this point in time. Not all of them, of course not even the majority of them, but a very vocal, increasing minority that has seized control of Israel itself. We have to understand that Israel is firmly in control, under the control of people who promote greater Israel, who view Palestinians as animals, who have said this and said it publicly. Israel today, as it exists, is incompatible with civilized life. It's incompatible with the rule of law. It's incompatible with the United Nations. The United Nations, which gave it life, Israel is turning on it like a cancer, seeking to bring it down. Israel's turning on everybody. This is what happens when a cancer gets into the final stages. It kills everything in order to keep itself alive. It will kill the host body to keep itself alive. That's what Israel is doing right now. It's a cancer, a tumor that must be excised if the region and the world is going to survive. Israel, as it's currently configured, cannot be allowed to exist. It has lost the right to exist. You don't get to do what Israel's doing. Total disregard for the law. Anytime a people say that we are more important than everybody else, that everybody else has to yield to our desire. Look, America's been saying that for some time now, and the world's turning on America. Israel ain't America. It's a tiny little country that's acting as if it has some sort of moral right to impose its will on the world, dictating to the United Nations that gave it life, dictating to the Palestinians, dictating to the Lebanese, and now dictating to America. The one thing they cannot live without is America, and they're starting to try and dictate to us. What the end game is going to be, I don't know. But I can say this, that Israel as it currently exists with this mindset, this political mindset, this ultra-Zionism, it will self-destruct because it's an unsustainable ideology, and the methodologies that they're using to keep themselves alive as a nation are incompatible with international humanity, international law. You know, I watched a video, I think it dates back to 1992, and there was a Holocaust survivor, a professor who had just won, I think, the Israel Prize, and he was being chastised by some right-wing Israeli politicians and academics because he had compared, Zionists, Jewish Zionists, to Nazis, and they were chastising him. How dare you do this? Do you? And the guy was hammering. Do you believe that Jews are Nazis? And he said there are elements within Israel that have embraced the ideology of the Nazis. And then he said, so they have the Israelis killed 6 million? Have we burned 6 million, put them up the crematorium? Have we done this? Have we done this? Have we done this? And the guy kept saying Israel has created these concentration camps. So the one guy conceded that Israel had created concentration camps, but he said, you can't call us Nazis because we haven't burned them in the ovens yet. And the last thing the guy said, as he pointed to him, he said, that's your prophecy. That's your prophecy, meaning that, before the crematorium came the concentration camps. Germany built concentration camps before they built crematorium. Israel built concentration camps before they decided to burn the Palestinians to death. And yesterday we saw Israel literally burn a Palestinian family to death, alive, in front of everybody, for the whole world to see. What's the world doing about it? Not a damn thing.
Yeah. Scott, right now in the United States, right and left, the Biden administration is putting out statements talking about that if Iran tries to harm Trump, it's an act of war. And it's so ridiculous, unbelievable right now, because the Iranian officials in New York, they gave tons of interviews to the mainstream media talking about these accusations that they're not interested in killing Trump or assassinating Trump or anything with Trump. And because at the end of the day, the foreign policy of the United States doesn't that much change. That doesn't change when it comes to Iran. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican, Democrat. They're having the same type of policy interactions with Iran. What would Iran be interested in assassinating Donald Trump or harming Donald Trump to help? I don't know, to help whatever it is in their mind.
Look, there's an element within Iran that definitely would like to see revenge against Donald Trump for the crime of assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Iran hasn't forgotten about that crime. But the leadership, the Iranian leadership, which would have to order this, is a leadership that looks strategically. And, doing something like that would trigger a response, potential of full-scale war. That why Iran doesn't need it. There's no strategic advantage to doing this. Iran is not the kind of nation that is going to commit national suicide just to say, oh, we got an act of revenge here. The Iranians have said that, one day the United States will pay a price, and that day may come, but not right now. There's too much at stake here. Iran doesn't want the United States to join in with Israel to attack it. So why would it give the United States any reason to do this? Iran wants to, be thoroughly integrated into BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization because that's the path towards their future economic, revival. Why would they want to undo that through a silly act of revenge? They're not trying to. I'll just make it clear as day. Iran is not trying to kill the president of the United States, and we know it too. It turns out that one of the intelligence threads that was used by Averill Haines when she briefed Donald Trump about the Iranian threat was an FBI setup where the FBI created the Iranian threat and was trying to lure somebody in, believing that he would be facilitating it. But that's like me saying that Al Qaeda is trying to. The FBI has done this before. Al Qaeda is trying to shoot down American airliners. So we go to Poughkeepsie, New York, and we go out in front of a mosque and we say, "Hey, who wants to get back at America, the evil Americans?" And somebody comes in, we say, "Hey, what do you think? You want to shoot down an airplane?" "I don't know. I mean, could we do that?" "Yeah, I can. I got a missile launcher here." "I don't know. Should we?" "Yeah, I could order the missile launcher for you." "Oh, all right. Well, why don't you order it? You're under arrest for trying to organize an Al Qaeda attempt to shoot down airplanes." I had no intention of shooting down airplanes. It's totally an FBI fabrication. And I would say that almost every aspect of this so-called Iranian threat against Donald Trump is an FBI fabrication. There's nothing real to it. And I can't say that I've seen the intelligence. I haven't. I've seen things there. But again, I used to be part of that game, at a pretty good level. And I know how that game is played. And the game hasn't changed. And so the U.S. intelligence community is not about trying to secure the national security interests of the United States. The U.S. intelligence community has been thoroughly corrupted by politicization, and their job is to advance the political interests of the powers that are in, or namely speaking, the establishment. Donald Trump is not of the establishment, and so the intelligence community is designed to disrupt Donald Trump, to interfere with Donald Trump, to create problems for Donald Trump. If you think that this, what did Donald Trump say a week before this? A week before this, and a lot of Americans didn't pick up on it, but he said the sanctions against Iran is stupid. He said, I put sanctions on when I was president, but I take them off. And he said, right now we should be in the business of taking the sanctions off of Iran so that we can pursue stability in the region. And suddenly Iran wants to assassinate Donald Trump. Cause and effect relationship, ladies and gentlemen. The intelligence community, the establishment, the Biden administration couldn't allow Donald Trump to further that line of thinking. And so suddenly we have an Iranian assassination attempt against the president that simply doesn't exist.